Hear me?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Greeting from Malaysia. Thank you for joining us tonight on this special webinar on public banking, debt jubilee, and sovereign money, national solution to counter international narrative. My name is Helmi Shafani Buholia, your moderator tonight, and together with our speakers, we are from Movement for Monetary Justice Malaysia, or short MMJ. MMJ is a non-profit organization based in Malaysia, striving to bring about the needed monetary reform in Malaysia and elsewhere in order to bring about inclusiveness, fairness, stability, and sustainable socio-economic development. Established in 2018, MMJ frequently organizing talks, webinars to inform and educate the masses about the required reform, particularly in Malaysia, and tonight, hopefully, at international level. Established in 2018, MMJ frequently organizing talks, webinars to inform. With us tonight, we have three esteemed speakers. Our first speaker, Mr. Aziz, will talk about public banking. Our second speaker, Professor Dato' Ahmad Kamil Badimira on debt jubilee, and Dr. Ahmad Razban on sovereign money. Our last session will be the Q&A session where our viewers can ask questions either from our FB page or YouTube channel. And now, let me introduce to you our first speaker, Mr. Muhammad Zahid Abdul Aziz. Yeah? Mr. Aziz holds a Bachelor degree in Economics from University of Exeter, United Kingdom, and Islamic Banking and Finance, UIAM. After graduating with the first degree in 1997, he joined an international accounting firm, Arthur Young & Company, London office. He returned to Malaysia in 1982 and joined Arab Merchant Bank in Kuala Lumpur. He joined Bank Islam Berhad in 1980, then where he pioneered and helped to develop Islamic corporate banking, specializing in Islamic syndication and sukuk iswan. He left Islamic Bank Islam in the September 2000 to form Muamalah Financial Consulting and Islamic Financial Consulting Sharia Advisory Company. Yeah, and our second speaker is Professor Dato' Dr. Ahmad Kamil Badimira. I will introduce his background just before he gives talk, and our third speaker will be Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Razban Abdul Latif. I think I would like to first of all welcome our speakers, Mr. Zahid Aziz, Professor Kamil, and Dr. Ahmad Razban. Okay, so we'll start with Brother Zahid first on public banking. Then later on we'll come in with Prof. Ahmad Kamil and then Dr. Ahmad Razban. Yeah. Okay. So without having that being said, I would like to welcome Mr. Zahid Aziz to talk about public banking. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Hilmi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We are very excited today to welcome our friends from all over the world. I understand there are registrations from Bosnia, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Ghana, Malawi, Mauritius, and a lot more. Yeah. So welcome, everybody. Today is our first international webinar. Movement for Monetary Justice is a member of the International Movement for Monetary Reform. And basically, we are about reforming the monetary system so that we can take away money creation away from the private banks and to bring it to the state level so that it will be on a fairer basis. Yeah. Okay. Helmi, can I share my screen, inshallah?
Yes, please. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I hope you can see the screen. We will be covering 3 possible solutions to the current monetary system. Yeah, the current monetary system, basically, not many people really realize it, but it is a system which a legacy which we receive from somebody. I will explain a bit later. But the point is, most of it, what happened is that money in our country, only the paper notes and the coins amounting to 3% to 5%, which is printed by the government. 95% numbers money, which is created by the private banks when they give out loans. Okay, I'll explain a bit later. So when you have the private sector creating money for your nation, then you can imagine the clash in the objectives. Their objectives is, of course, to maximize their profit, which can be to the detriment of the nation in terms of inflation, in terms of youth and graduate unemployment, in terms of rocketing house prices, and in terms of widening poverty gap at the domestic level. At the international level is a bit worse. I mean, nations can be turned into debt slaves, which I will explain a bit later. And then they can use the weapon of money to destroy our country. Yeah. So I have a tendency to divert a lot if I don't refer to the slide. So allow me to refer to the slides. Yeah. Okay. All right. The title of our webinar is International Webinar by Movement for Monetary Justice, International Affairs Department. So we feel it is about time that we share this knowledge with the rest of the world. There's 2 levels of knowledge. One is what to do at the national level. And the other is, of course, how to prepare yourself against the international onslaught by the people who understand the monetary system, who use it against our interests, basically. Yeah, I will explain later. And the topic of the webinar is public banking, debt jubilee, and sovereign money as national solutions to counter international narratives. You will see people need to understand the monetary system. Let me very quickly explain the entire monetary system so that when I go through the slides, you have an understanding what it's all about. Yeah. At the international level, it all began in 1910. It began in 1910 in the US, where they created the first privately owned central bank in the world, the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was formed in 1910. 5 banking families tabled the Federal Reserve Act on the Christmas Eve 1910 to an empty Congress. What they wanted to do was they wanted to hide the fact that banks can create money and lend it at interest. Yeah, that's one thing you're going to learn tonight. We're going to repeat it often. Banks do not lend from deposits. Banks create new numbers money whenever they give out loans. Okay, so in 1910 they created the Federal Reserve, the only central bank in the whole world which is owned by the private sector. So that was the Federal Reserve. So what they wanted to do was to ensure that that narrative is carried out throughout the world, and they do this through our central bank. Yeah, they adopted or they took over an organization called the Bank of International Settlements, based in Basel, Switzerland. This organization basically was set up for war reparations after the Second World War, but they took it over, and then from Basel, from the Bank of International Settlements, they issue Basel Accords. Basel Accords, where all the central bank governors come, and they will adopt these policies in Basel. They will go back and implement in their own countries. Yeah? So what we're trying to say tonight, these policies are not necessarily innocent policies. Yeah. So the other thing I just want to say, if you are to Google Basel, you will find that in 1897, Basel was also the birthplace of the World Zionist Organization. Right. So I'm not going to say anything more than that. Now, the other thing about the international monetary system, there is a book which I hope that most of you have read or will find to buy and read. It's called The Economic Hitman by John Perkins. Yeah? John Perkins used to work for the World Bank in the 1950s and 1960s. And what they used to do was the World Bank is a bank based in America, funded American money, most of it basically. So what they did was they identified poorly developed countries, underdeveloped countries in the 1950s and 1960s, and they approved for them huge mega projects, dams, electric generation plants, huge mega projects at a time when the countries are really not able to cope, not able really to repay the loan. That was deliberate, actually. So what they did was they approved. Let's say one classic example is Ecuador. They approved a $2 billion loan, $2 billion US dollar loan to build a dam in Ecuador at a time when Ecuador really not able to utilize it. And then they make a condition. They make a condition that all the resources, all the professional fees, all the professional requirements must come from America. So what happened is the US $2 billion did not leave American shores at all. Yeah, but Ecuador ended up with a $2 billion dam in 1960 at a time when they cannot cope. So definitely the whole game plan was to make sure Ecuador fail in repayment. And when Ecuador fails in repayment, you know what will happen. Ecuador becomes a debt slave nation. And there is a whole list of debt slave nations at the moment because of this hideous practice. Yeah. So that's what we are about tonight. We're going to tell you what you need to do if you take our advice. And the most important message that will come from us is be very, very careful of international debts. Yeah? Okay, as I say, if I don't follow my slide, I will diverge a lot. All right, now, my topic is public banking. Now, what is public banking? Very simple. Very simple. It's nothing complicated. A public bank is just like any ordinary bank. It has current accounts, give out loans, etc. But the difference is it is owned or majority owned by the state, number one. Number two, unlike the private banks, which I will show you the statistic later, where most of the loans, most of the new money goes to personal loans and credit cards, go to the personal sector, which creates inflation, creates poverty gap, creates unemployment. For public banking, the majority of the loans money goes to the real sector to create economic output and to create employment. It makes a difference, a very big difference, that our banks point the money hose to the real sector. So what we have at the moment in many countries today, we have banks, we have major banks, we have big banks, all right? But, for example, I can tell you the percentage in Malaysia. In Malaysia, 70% of loans, 70%, 65 to 70% of money, loans, goes to personal loans, credit cards, and things like that, which does not really create output, but it creates heavy inflation suffered by the people. You will create a poverty gap, you will create unemployment. Yeah, I will explain a bit later. Now, the other thing that you need to digest is that a bank is a money creator. That one you have to digest. You have to accept that fact. That the fact that a bank is a money creator has been proven, has been declared by the Bank of England, by the European Central Bank, and even by the Federal Reserve. So it's a fact. Yeah. Now, the money that the banks are creating are not paper notes and coins. The money they are creating are in the form of numbers. Okay. Those paper notes and coins in your pockets, just between maximum about 5% of total money, which you go to the ATM machine, you take it out to pay for breakfast, to pay for a cup of tea. Yeah? All the major payments in your country are movement of numbers online, from your account to somebody else's account, from a company's account to another company's account, all in numbers. So I hope you can imagine. You can imagine that the major movement of money in any country are in the form of numbers moving online from one account to another account. All right, this is the 95% of money created in all countries. Okay, now a public bank is also a money creator. Okay, now on average, I will show you further statistics, but on average, private banks of the world, the people we have given the right to create money. Creating of money, if you think about it, is actually a national right, the right of the government and the right of the people in charge. But we have been fooled by this system where we have allowed private banks to create money. We have never questioned the system that we are practicing. And suddenly we have a situation where private banks create 95% of the money for the nation, which is fine if they direct those money to the real sector. If they direct it to the manufacturing, to the services, it will create economic output, it will create employment. That's fine, nothing wrong. You can't fault them for that. But these private banks, unfortunately, most of them direct the money to the personal sector, to the personal loans, the credit cards, which benefit them, which make a lot of profits for them, but it's bad for the nation in terms of inflation and stunting of economic growth and employment. Yeah. So on average, these private banks extend only 20% to the real sector and 80% to the personal sector. Yeah. Those of you who are bankers, private bankers, and don't worry, I will show you how. I will also show you how that you can change your portfolio, how you can extend loans to the real sector without worrying about the risk, without worrying about the human resource costs. I know those are your concerns. I will explain how you can do it later on. Yeah. Okay, frequently advised question, do banks create money? Yes, and as I've mentioned, two types of money. The paper notes and coins are the one created by our central banks. That is about 3 to 5%. But the majority of money in all countries are in the form of numbers created by banks, yeah, when they give out loans. And the people who understand and they acknowledge this quietly in your country are the central bank. The central bank, they understand this perfectly, yeah. But many in the government and many of the population do not understand this. So it's your job to explain. Now, I thought it would be easier if I put it in the form of a graphic. Yeah? What is the meaning of banks as money creators? So, all right. So basically, if you imagine the banks are holding a garden hose, and out of the garden hose appears water, which appears money. So that is basically the graphic situation of a banking system in any country. Yeah, the money comes out from the bank, from the garden hose, and it goes to mostly housing, personal loans, very little to the real sector, and also to cars. Okay, so the majority will be housing, personal loan, credit cards, and cars. The one going to the factory is at most about 20 to 35%. That's all. Yeah, so that's how graphically things work. Okay, now there are some statistics. I'm going to dwell on this page for a while. In the world today, 80% of loans go to the personal and non-productive sector, which is the problem that we are facing now. Only 20% to the real sector. In the UK, the ratio is 84-16. In Malaysia, it's 65-35. 65 to the personal sector, 35 to the real sector. And I dissected one of the largest bank in Africa, and true to form, this very large bank who operates many countries in Africa, 66% goes to personal loan and credit cards, only 34% goes to the real sector. Yeah. So when the money goes to the area which does not create goods and services, it will just create inflation suffered by the people. Now, your central bank will normally announce the inflation rate for the year. In Malaysia, they will say it's 3% per annum. So when you hear the word 3%, so you think it's very small. But if you pause and think, what they're really saying is 3% per annum. So if it's from 1900 to the year 2000, that will be 100 years times 3%. So the price of whatever food you're eating in 1900 will be 300% higher in the year 2000. That's just an example. So actually, the inflation rate is very high and usually suffered most by the poor in our nation, because they are the one who's stuck with the low wages, and they are the one who has to suffer this inflation. I don't know whether it has happened in your countries, but in some wet markets in Malaysia, we find little old ladies going to the market to buy one small fish, because that is what they can afford. Yeah. So this is a big issue to the poor people of the world. Okay. So it should be a concern to us also. Yeah. Now, the other statistic, a very important statistic, which cannot be denied by anyone, is that the biggest percentage of employment in any nation are created by the SME sector. Okay. On average, they create between 60 to 80% of employment in the nation. I will show you some more detailed statistics later. They contribute 40% to GDP. And do you know how many percent our banks gave to the SME sector? Let me tell you, on average, only between 4 to 7% of the total loans. Yeah? So the sector that creates employment for the nation is only given 4 to 7% of the total loans of the country, because we have outsourced, we have given the right to create money to these private institutions who says that it's not my concern. My concern is to make profit for my shareholders. It's really not my concern for me to create employment. So what we wanted was this institution. We have given this institution the right to create money in our nation. We want the institution to divert that money to the real sector to create employment, but that's not happening. That is not happening because of the entrenched system that's set by Basel and the Basel Accord and whatnot. And they talk about risk. Risk is, I think if you mention the word risk in a room full of bankers, I think everybody will run out of the room. Yeah, but I need to remind the Muslims among us, we have a legal maxim, Qa'idah fiqhiyah, aghunnam bi aghurum. You are not, aghunnam bi aghurum translate to reward comes with risk. You are not entitled to receive a reward unless you are willing to accept the risk. That is the legal maxim we should be living by. Yeah, but it has been brainwashed into our heads for 100 years now, that a risk is like the plague. We hate risk. Risk is ugly, because when they promote risk as ugly, then they can maintain the current system. But you need to remember, your religion say you're not entitled to receive any reward unless you're willing to accept the risk. Yeah. Okay. Now, just another. I've mainly got Malaysia statistics. Just another statistic. We were independent from Britain in 1957. Between 1957 to 2021, the Malaysian banks have given to the personal sector the amount of loans which is outstanding today, 1.27 trillion ringgit, equivalent to 400 billion US dollar. Now I ask you to stop, pause, and imagine with me. If this 400 billion US dollar had been given to the real sector, how much economic output and how much jobs would have been created for Malaysia? Okay. Once you have let that sunk in, then try to think how much is the outstanding personal loan in your country, and imagine what would have happened to the employment in your country if that money had been used to fund the real sector. Yeah, I have an assignment for all of you on I think slide number 10. So most of you should have, all of you should have pen and paper ready. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at the. I said that the SMB create jobs in all countries. Now let's have a look at some statistics. Indonesia, 99.6% of jobs are created by the SMB sector, not the big companies. Egypt, 91%. Even Korea, the economic powerhouse, 86.7%. Pakistan, 80%. Singapore, Japan, 74%. Even China. This is the sector which is neglected by your banking industry. All right. So this must be when if we are able to rewrite our economic policy, then we must be able to make sure our SMEs are well funded. Yeah. Then of course, when you say that, there will be squeals from the bank. You know, they will, oh, SME risky, SME not enough capital, we don't have enough staff. Tell them Mr. Zahid have a solution in slide number 23 something. Just wait. Okay. Malaysia 65, Singapore 50, Morocco 48. In Africa, I managed to get some statistics. Egypt 91% jobs created by SMB. Ethiopia 90%, Uganda 90, Kenya 80, Nigeria 70, Rwanda 60, South Africa 60, etc. In fact, 2/3 of jobs in Africa are created by the SME sector. So the SME sector must be a sector that we focus on, not a sector we neglect because we prefer personal loans and credit card. That is wrong, okay? Unemployment statistics for graduate and youth in the world, 1/5 of the youth population in the world is unemployed. So if there is 1.3 billion youth, the amount about 260 million youths are unemployed in the world because of the banking system that we operate. 25% of youth in Africa and 40% of graduates unemployed in Africa. Asia Pacific, the percentage is 14.1 youth unemployment. Global, 13% youth unemployment, which is 3 times the adult unemployment. In Malaysia, they put very low numbers, but I think the real number is 500,000 unemployed. Indonesia, 1.4 million youth unemployed. Philippines, 1 million. That's a lot of unemployed youth and graduates, because we adopted this system, which we never question. We are very, very good citizens of the world. Somebody gave us a monetary system, we just accept because we don't question at all. So tonight, I hope you all will begin to question. Yeah. Unemployment statistics for graduates and youth, okay, in the world by country. This is youth unemployment in each country. South Africa, 64% of youth are unemployed. Angola, 57. Nigeria, 53. Kosovo, 43. Namibia, 46. These are huge numbers of unemployed youth. You know, I was in Abuja a few years ago. I can see the unemployment of the youth there. Okay, so let's address the real reason. I mean, if you open up the newspapers, the magazine, they will talk about so many things. They will talk about all these youths have got no skills. or this use choosy, but they have never touched the fact that money was never given to the sector that can create employment. Yeah? If you don't believe me, go back and look at the magazines, look at the articles in the newspaper. When they talk about youth unemployment, the blame is always on the youth. The youth do not have the skills. The youth went to the university and learned a subject which is outdated. There is always the excuse that comes even from journalists, which I'm ashamed to mention. So basically tell them from today onwards, please look at the real reason. The real reason there is unemployment of youth in Africa is because the banking sector does not direct the funds to the SME. That is the real reason. Yeah. Okay. In Asia, contribution to GDP, 40% at least in Malaysia, Japan 55, etc. I will leave this presentation in our FB, FB, or I can even email them to you if you want. So don't worry, you have access to this. Yeah. And SME contribution to GDP in Africa, you can see the numbers there. They are very significant. They are not insignificant. Ghana, 70%. South Africa, 60. Nigeria, 50. So these are very important sector of the economy. What we have done is because we have never questioned the monetary system, we allowed it to make an orphan of the SME sector. And then we wonder, how come there is so much youth unemployment in our country? Please go and tell your government, go and tell your government leaders, this is what you must do now. You must focus on funding the SME, okay? Okay, let me go back to the topic, public banks. Now the public banks actually, they performed very well in the 19th century. They performed so well that there are people who got jealous about the performance. In the 20th century means 19 something, they contributed to the nation's economic development because they focused on the real economy. They were intensely disliked by the private bankers, and the private bankers worked to make sure all these public banks were privatized. And when the public banks were privatized, then the nation suffered, okay? Because the public bank would focus on the infrastructure and the manufacturing sector and the national services, yeah? And in fact, when the public bank finance your infrastructure, the cost is actually 50% cheaper. And today I'm going to reveal to you why China is able to monopolize all the major projects in the world. It has to do with public banking. Yeah? Okay, historically, example of some successful public banks in the world, you can Google, Bank of North Dakota, USA, is that still operating. And the current 4 biggest banks in China are public banks. Yeah. And these 4 biggest banks in China, incidentally, is also the 4 biggest banks in the world. The public banks is the engine behind China economic growth. Yeah? And then historically, these banks no longer exist. They were killed by the private bankers. You can Google Commonwealth Bank of Australia that built up Australia, Bank of Canada, Bank of New Zealand. These were all public banks that did wonders to their country before they were privatized by the people who do not like their performance. Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to show you the effect of public banking, comparison to performance of China led by private banking and Malaysia led by private banking, because these are the statistics that I have. I have access to Malaysian statistics, yeah? So you can find the statistic for your country also. And let's just look at the GDP first. Okay. Let me move. How can I move this? Okay. hold on. I'm trying to, okay. Right. GDP, China versus Malaysia. Okay, now, Malaysia, we're talking, let's say 2021, I think our GDP about 370 billion US dollar. Yeah. China, when you have 3 zeros there, we're talking about trillions. Yeah. China is about 1.4 trillion, or is that 14 trillion GDP size? Huh? Of course, China is bigger than Malaysia, but the difference between Chinese GDP and the Malaysian GDP is too big to consider it is just because of the size. Huh? So what is the secret behind China's GDP growth? The GDP growth rate in China, we see that they are 6.1%, and Malaysia 4.3 on average. Yeah, that's the GDP growth. So let's just examine performance of China public banks versus Malaysia public banks. All right. Now the 4 big banks of China, which are public banks, are the Industrial Commercial Bank of China. Percentage owned by the state, 70%. They give 61% to the real sector, only 39% to the personal sector. Yeah. China Construction Bank, 61% owned by the state. They give 56% to the real sector, 44% to the personal sector. Agricultural Bank of China, 84% owned by the state, 58% to the real sector, 42% to the personal sector. Bank of China, 65% owned by the state, 61% to the real sector, 39% to the personal sector. Now, in Malaysia, we have public banks, but unfortunately, our public banks do not have current accounts. They are not money creators. So they are very limited in their growth and impact on the economy. We have Bank Pembangunan Development Bank, 100% owned by our finance ministry. They give 100%. They give 100% to the real sector, 0% to the personal sector, but because they can't create money, they can't create money, so they can't really make an impact on the economy. It's the same with the SME bank. So we are now trying to get our government to give us these 2 banks and at least give them current accounts so that they can become a money creator, and then they can develop the economy. We have a situation where our public banks are not money creators, our private banks are. Our private banks, you can see how they fund their loans. You have a look. These are our private banks. We have six big banks. Maybank, you've probably heard of Maybank. Actually, it is majority owned by state institutions, 66%, but the government allows it to operate like a private bank. Therefore, you look at the numbers in red, only 34% goes to the real sector, a whopping 66% to personal loans and credit cards. CIMB, again, another majority owned. It is a public bank in terms of ownership, but in terms of lending, only 30% the real sector, 70% to the sector that benefits them, the personal loans, credit cards, etc. Public bank is a wholly owned majority private shareholders. Only 22% are owned by government institutions, 80% are private individuals. Yeah. So you can see when a bank is owned so huge privately, they only give 13% to the real sector, 87% to the personal loans sector. RHB, 31% the real sector, 69% the personal sector. Hong Leong Bank, another privately owned bank. And when a bank is privately owned, be careful, you go back and check the ownership of your banks. Whenever they are privately owned, you will see that the sector the amount of money that goes to the real sector is very small. In this example, 30%, and the real sector and the personal sector, 70%. Yeah. So there is a lesson there. There is a lesson there. What is the lesson? The lesson is when your nation is, the economy of your nation is pushed by the private banks, they're not going to do what is best for the nation. They will do what is best for their profits, which is not necessarily good for the nation. But when the big banks in your country are public banks, and then they will give a lot of the funding to the real sector that benefits the nation. That is lesson, a very important lesson we must remember. Okay. And then I went through the annual report of these 4 big China banks, and I noticed one common theme. The ICBC, the Industrial Construction Bank of China, in its annual report, it says the bank always keep in mind its underlying mission of serving the real economy. China Construction Bank, we pursue the high quality development of the real economy. ABC, what that stands for, Agricultural Bank of China, we played an active part in supporting the nation's real economy. Bank of China, we continually improve quality and efficiency in serving the real economy. So can you now see what is the secret behind China? And in many countries, we allow our private banks to focus on what makes them profitable to the detriment of the objectives of the nation. I think you need to bear that in mind. You need to inform your government leaders about this. If you want jobs for your nation, you want jobs for your youth, then you need to address the monetary system. Okay. And this is another graph of what happens when you allow private banks to decide to create money for you, and they give it to the area that benefits them. Okay, so in Malaysia, most of the money goes to the housing, the personal loans, and the cars, 65%. Only 35% goes to the real sector. Yeah, so the impact will be. So the impact will be inflation. For food inflation, suffered most by the poor. Rocketing house prices. I think most nations are experiencing that. Unemployment of youth and graduates, huge unemployment. Poverty gap, widening. Instead of narrowing the poverty gap, the rich gets richer, the poor gets poorer. That's what the system does. The system ensures the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. And you have economic output and employment growth stunted because you allow the banks to do as they please. And in Malaysia, 65-35, in the world is 80-20. Yeah? Let's just go through the difference between an economy led by public banking and an economy led by private banking. What are the differences? Economy led by public banking, the money is focused in the real economy, jump in economic output. Economy led by private banking, money focused to the personal sector and similar, and you have a jump in inflation. Okay, let's pause and consider that. I think, I hope that you are able to initiate changes in your country. Yeah? In an economy led by public banking, the bank's objectives and the nation's objectives are the same. So the end result is strong economic growth and employment. Economy led by private banking, banks' objectives to enrich the shareholders. The national objective is secondary, and economic growth and employment does not reach its real potential. Yeah? Economy led by public banking, The banks execute national economic objectives. Economy led by private banking, the banks execute profit maximization of their shareholders. The nation's economic objective is not that important. Cost savings in national infrastructure. And and there is banks' interest cost in all national infrastructure. If the government owns the bank and it wants to build a major highway for your country, why should it charge interest in giving loans to this company? Because the bank belongs to the government, so they do not charge the interest, and the cost of the highway is cheaper. And this other difference, a lower cost for national bids in international projects. Okay. Now, this is the reason China is all over Africa, all over Asia with projects. They have discovered something that the West have not yet gotten onto. They own their banks, and they own the construction companies that's going out to win international bids. Can you see now? Let's say they are competing with a Malaysian company to build a port in Nigeria, for example. The Malaysian company is competing with the Chinese company to build a port in Nigeria, for example. So when we submitted the bid, we will have our big company will be Sime Darby and our big bank will be Maybank. Now, in calculating the bid, Sime Darby will take into account the interest Maybank will charge them. When China submit the bid, there is zero interest from the public bank to go to the public company, public construction company that they own. That's one. So hands down, they will win all bids throughout the world. That's number one. Number two, they make a condition that everything must come from China. All the resources must come from China. So you can imagine, wages is quite low there. You can imagine, again, there is no profit transfer between the companies. Yeah. And then if you were to check some of the workers in Nigeria or everywhere, some of them looks very tough. They're probably the members of the Red Army. So all in, they are able to bring down the cost. So that is why they are able, because later I will show you that when they go to Africa, to bid for project, they do not borrow from European Bank. They do not borrow from the World Bank because the money they credit themselves. Everything they credit themselves. So their cost is very much lower. Yeah? So we need to learn. We need to learn from China. We need to be able to do what China is doing so that we can benefit from this knowledge. Yeah. And lastly, I often mention in Kuala Lumpur this fact. In Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia, the banks make about $8 billion per annum in profits. Now I said to the voters here, I said, look, if we have given them the right to create money. Now, if that is taken away from them, done by the government under the sovereign money concept, which our Dr. Azman will explain, that means that that 8 billion profit per annum belongs to the government, doesn't it? And when that belongs to the government, you can have basic income for the poor, free education to university, and you can remove almost 70% of the population from having to pay income tax. Yeah? But if you stay the cost as it is now, the nation will be burdened with inflation, youth and graduates unemployment, rocketing house prices, widening of poverty gaps. Yeah? Okay, so remember I told you there is an assignment. So this is what you need to do. Take out your pens and pencils. Download the annual reports of the top 5 banks in your country. Determine the percentage of ownership between the public and the private. That's one. And then from the accounts, the balance sheet and the notes to the account. The notes at the balance sheet, you just look at loans and advances. They give the total. The balance sheet will give you the total loans and advances. Notes to the account will give you a split between the personal and the real sector, and just calculate what is the ratio between the personal sector and the real sector and compare. Is it the same as Malaysia? I've done it for one of your big banks, and I found it's almost the same. Yeah? So you can submit them to monetaryjustice@gmail.com or to our Telegram, and then we can have our private discussions. Yeah. All right, so I'm just moving on to the second part of my presentation. I call this Principles of Islamic Worldview, Real Economics. Now, I think quite a number of you are economic students yourself. So basically, we've been taught, some of the things we've been taught are wrong, basically. One of the things, the economic textbook will tell you that the banks are very innocent lenders of money. They lend, they take deposit, they give loans. So loans come from deposit. That's what our economic textbook teaches us. Whereas in reality, banks are money creators. They create havoc to the economy. Yeah. So, and then the other favorite statement by economists is that before there is investments, there must be savings. You remember that principle? Okay, it's also nonsense. So before there is investment, there must be approval by the credit committee of the bank, basically. It's the bank that determines whether there is investment or not the number of savings, not the amount of savings in the nation. So there is an organization, there is a movement called Rethinking Economics. You can Google that, you can join them. So basically, they are trying to rewrite economics. We're facing a bit of difficulty because a lot of people have been taught on the old notion, so it's a bit difficult for them to accept this new principles. There were students from Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken, economic students from Netherlands who had a walkout protest from the university demanding that the lecturers teach them real economics. How can it be real when the economic textbooks say banks lend from deposits, when you know in reality that banks are money creators? Yeah. Okay. Usually I do not talk about the features of Sharia money because I assume husnul zan that you would believe that I am aware of the Sharia aspects of money, but it seems I better talk about Sharia money a little bit so that at least the viewers will know that the movement for monetary justice do understand. Yeah. So some of the features of Sharia money can be simplified to the Quran and the Sunnah. It usually points to gold and silver as money. You'll find it Surah Al-Kahfi, etc. Yeah. And the gold and silver have been used as money during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dinar and dirham. Yeah? Dinar come from the Roman denarus, dirham from the Persian drachma. Yeah? So these gold coins and silver coins came into being during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they were not enough. So huge transactions. They exchange sackfuls of dates, salt, and barley, which have been used as money also. Yeah. And we need to remember Sayyidina Umar radiallahu an had suggested camel skins as money, but the suggestion was not implemented. And our Imam Malik declared that money is whatever is accepted by the Ummah as a medium of exchange. So the principle that we can take away from all this, that the fuqaha view of money is that it's not a commodity that can or should be traded. In fact, Al-Ghazali prohibits money from being traded. The important thing about money the principle that we can take from this is that money should remain a means of exchange which maintains its value permanently. Of course, gold and silver have the illah to achieve this. Okay, But until we arrive at a situation where there is a viable alternative, then we may have to apply the principle of ijtihad. That one I dare not say because that needs the consent of the scholars. But let me just go through the process. In usul fiqh, we will try and find the illah in the hukum and see whether the principle of qiyas can be used. So obviously, in the world today, the solution for gold and silver or money, which is ayn, intrinsic values, is still outstanding, not yet solved. So until we have the practical solution in place, maqasid sharia, objective of sharia, requires us to continue to trade and to conduct international trade, although unhappily for the maslahah of the ummah. There were many attempts to create this alternative system for Muslim countries. Our own Tun Dr. Mahathir has come up with the gold exchange dinar. You may Google that. But until that solution is solved, then we have to look for the nearest achievable solution. And that could be paper money backed by gold or ayn, or as in the last gold standard, or in the gold netting system, which you can ask Prof. Kamil. He's the expert on that. So in the meantime, we hold to the illah of money that cannot be overproduced and is directed to the real economy. So when you can't achieve that yet, so you just make sure that the money you're using must not be overproduced. And when you produce it, it has to be directed to the real economy so that inflation is not created, subject to further consent and approval by the scholars. Okay, in that case, what is the correct money system for us now? If we don't like what I have mentioned, what is the correct system? That in detail, the detail will be provided by Dr. Razman. Let me just give you a preview. Money will be created by a state body. That's the preferred situation. The central bank that reports directly to a select committee of parliament. Because if parliament is not involved, then there will be accusations of Zimbabwe, whatever. Yeah. And then the central bank, we should take it out from the Ministry of Finance and does not report to the Bank of International Settlements of Basel. That's the ideal situation. And the current banks, they still have a function. They will turn themselves into either payment banks. In other words, they handle the payments only like debit cards. They can't lend. Payment banks cannot lend. And then we have private investing banks that invest in companies on mudarabah and musyarakah. These investing banks cannot operate the payment system. You have to separate the payment system from the investing lending system to break the money creation ability of the banks. You give the money creation ability to the central bank, which is under parliament. That would be the ideal sovereign money system, which is also being promoted in many countries in Europe at the moment with different levels of success. Yeah. We may also need to have a state investment bank where the central bank will provide money to them to invest in the real economy in the model of the public banking you mentioned just now. Yeah. And then the money required for the nation, instead of being created whenever a private bank gives loan, it can be a budget prepared by the Economics Committee of the Finance Ministry, submitted to the Parliamentary Money Committee. Yeah. So upon approval, the central bank will create the money by accounting entry. There are many thoughts about this, but my simple proposal is credit reserve, debit operating account. Other people will prefer to include a liability element inside there. That's fine. Or such other entries as preferred. This money will be transferred to the state investment bank for investment, for it to invest in the state infrastructure and real economy. And like the Prophet ﷺ, we should have an Al-Hizbah institution to oversee the economy and the operations of all the important entities in the economy. Yeah. Now, I promised to tell you how the investing banks can lend to SME without worry of risk and human resource costing. Yeah. And incidentally, this is also how current private banks can increase lending to the SME. So in other words, don't worry. I know I have many friends listening who are private bankers. Don't worry. You also can increase your lending, your investing, your financing to the SME by adopting these proposals. Yeah? So this is how we can increase lending and financing to the SME and the real sector. As a result, we'll increase employment, economic output for our nation, while mitigating the risk concern and the payroll cost of bank officers. Because if you ask the current bank why they don't give money to SME, the common answer given is SME is risky, and then they cannot afford to supervise because it's too costly for them to engage bank officers to supervise. So I'm going to suggest a solution. The solution I'm suggesting is economy or lending or investing or financing based on equity investment, not interest. Yeah. So here we have the investing or the financing bank. Instead of having credit officers to process the loans being collateralized and self-managed, we will now have investment officers. Yeah. To supervise mudarabah and musyarakah equity investments in the companies. Yeah? No more credit officers, but investment officers. Yeah? And you can employ as many investment officers as possible because you don't pay them salary. Okay? You pay them a basic allowance plus a profit sharing basis with you on the investments that you have made to the SME. They will be paid a small basic allowance plus monthly profit sharing with the bank. So that means when you give the musyarakah amount to the SME, they will create monthly accounts to determine the profit for each month, and the profit will be brought by the investment officers to the bank and then shared between the bank and the investment officer. Okay. And then we will, of course, train the investment officers because not all are economics or business and administration. We have sociology graduates, psychology graduates also without jobs. So we will train them in a special 6 months to 1 year investment officer schools in collaboration with our universities in joint venture project within the government and the bank. So we go to the universities, we create this special school. 6 months to 1 year, we train these unemployed graduates, come in 1st January, 31st December, they go out as investment officers. Yeah? So it is expected this policy will remove the problem of unemployed graduates and school leavers in your nations. And how are jobs to be created? How jobs will be created? Number one, the banks itself will require lots of investment officers. Yeah? Today, I think in most branches of bank, there's 2 or 3 credit officers. Yeah, and now we can talk about 50 credit officers at each branch, because it's not a burden on your human resource costs anymore, because we are going on profit sharing. Yeah? The SMB sector, which already is creating 70 to 80% nation job, you imagine. When it's not well funded, it's creating 70 to 80% of the nation's job. If it is funded, you can imagine the volume of jobs the SME sector will create. That will wipe out your youth unemployment. Yeah? And of course, in the busy SME region, secondary multiplier jobs will be created. And the hotels, the petrol pumps, the restaurants, and other secondary jobs. Yeah? So just by moving away from this fear of risk and adopting the Islamic concept of equity immediately, inshallah, you will solve the youth unemployment problem in your nation. All bank facilities on long term will be musyarakah profit and loss sharing. And then we can talk about the other facilities. Yeah. So what will happen to the nation is the economic output will experience a huge jump as money is almost diverted 100% to the real sector. Inflation will drop, poverty gap diminish, unemployment remove as employment surge through a well-funded SME sector. This is what we mean national solution to counter the international narratives. It's about time we debunk the international narratives, and we create a path of our own so that we achieve what is best for our nation. I'm going to go very quickly because I think I've gone into injury time. Be careful of people coming bearing international loans or debts. And you need to remember the reminder given by President Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso and President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. These are my two African heroes. Of course, Nelson Mandela is one of them, but two unsung heroes of Africa is Thomas Sankara and Paul Kagame. Why? Thomas Sankara is just an army officer, but a far-thinking president. He knows that debt can destroy his country. So he knows that you can develop your country using your own currency. Similarly, Paul Kagame of Rwanda, he has said many, many times, African countries need to stop borrowing and start, I don't like the word printing money. Let's say, start using your local currency. Let me explain how we can do that, okay? Now, once you take away the myth of money, you will realize that a nation can fund your national projects using your own currency without using international loans, on condition that the project that you are going to set up, all the resources come from inside the country. So if all the resources, the human resource, the material resource, all comes from within the country, there is no reason whatsoever for you to take an international loan. You can do it using your own currency. And if you need to import equipment, then that is the time that you have to export some of your raw materials to get cash to buy the equipment. But if the projects are all inside, the resources required are inside your country, believe me, you can fund it using your own currency. And any project coming from big investors like China, be careful. If it's still possible, make sure it's on equity basis, not on loan basis. And we need to understand who are behind the international financiers. And I have described to you who they are. There is a current lesson in hand. Sri Lanka experiencing a current forex and food crisis. They have borrowed too much money, okay? Their foreign reserves are being used to pay interest on loan. They have no money to pay for food. So there is a food crisis in Sri Lanka at the moment because of the direct result of too much international borrowing. 80% of the reserve spent on interest on international loans. So we need to be careful. You need to be careful. Do not easily take international loans. Consult Mr. Zahid. We'll be very happy to advise. These are two books that you must find. One is Confessions, Economic Hitman, John Perkins, about how the World Bank used to turn undeveloped countries into debt slaves. And the other one, The Creature from Jekyll Island, that would tell you how they formed the privately owned Federal Reserve in 1910. Of course, Zahid also have written a book called The Foam of the Waves of the Sea, The Case for an Islamic Monetary System. Unfortunately, I've run out of print, but my friend Justin, who runs the organization called UNRIBA, he still have lots of copies. So you just Google UNRIBA, UNRIBA, and then you'll find the book there. I think the cost should be about $15 US plus postage cost. And then finally, a special advice to our friend, the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan. We are very excited that you have regained your nation from the foreign forces. I just want to remind you what happened when President Morsi of Ikhwan Muslimin took over Egypt in 2012. Within 12 months, President Morsi's government collapsed. And the real reason behind that is because Egypt, for a long, long time, was a debt slave, has been a debt slave created by the international financiers. So it was just a matter of time. Even though Ikhwan Muslimin won the election fair and square, they were just smiling. They know that it's just a matter of time. This government will collapse. Why? Let's look at the numbers. The total external debt of Egypt in 2012-2013, 40 billion. Afghanistan, at the moment, your debt is only about 2.84. This is the information I can get from the external sources. Debt to GDP ratio, 80%. Afghanistan is only 7.5. Total debt of Egypt in 2012, 223 million US dollar. Afghanistan's debt is only 1.79 billion at the moment. GDP, 279. Afghanistan is 20 billion. Of course, you have been at war for so long. Budget deficit of Egypt in 2012 was 35 billion US dollar. Afghanistan only 200 million. And the current account deficit is 6.55 billion. Yeah. So take a lesson from this. The most important lesson is Afghanistan must never agree to take debt from anyone, not even China. Today I read that you're going to be with China. No problem. Be with China, but take equity. So what we need to do, what we need to realize, let me give you some facts about Afghanistan first. This is probably my last page, Hilmi, don't worry. It is mainly an agricultural country, population 38 million, bigger than France. Yeah? It is sitting on mineral reserve worth about 1 trillion US dollar, and some sizable oil and gas reserve. Currently, 75% of government budget funded by international donors. And Afghanistan have 9.5 billion assets belonging to the central bank, which is held back by the Biden government. Other international assistance also being held back. So what we see for Afghanistan is Afghanistan needs 1 year breathing space to build up its economy, its government economy, and development of mineral and other resources. So within this 1 year, we must recognize that our brother here needs a lot of help. Yeah? This is the time Muslim nations must come and assist Afghanistan so that they can stand on their own feet. You must come with the financial, with the resources, with the money, with the food to help them find their feet. And within these 12 months, then they can begin to talk to China about developing their resources, developing their infrastructure, but please, do not accept it on a debt basis. China will be very interested to work with Afghanistan. I'm sure China will agree to an equity arrangement with Afghanistan, because I think Afghanistan is a very strategic nation to them. They share a 50-kilometer boundary with Xinjiang, so I do not need to say much. From there, you know already. Afghanistan is a very strategic nation to China. They will agree. They will agree to the terms that you mentioned. But in the meantime, the Muslim countries must come to the financial aid, and we must not leave Afghanistan to the international hawks. Yeah? There was a forum a few days ago. If you go to Nizal, N-I-Z-A-L, Nizal and Company, and you will find this forum, and then you can listen to it, some of the suggestions that we have given for Afghanistan. So I'm sorry, Hilmi, for taking time. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Nagoda, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brother Zahid. Very interesting talks, and especially, I don't know maybe not many knows, 95% of money in the economy is mostly created by the private banks. Yeah, and also another point that I able to pick up, the most important point is that money creation creates inflation, which most of people thought it's something normal, which is not. Okay, and I think on your second part, I'm sure will be very beneficial to our friends, especially in Afghanistan, and hopefully they will able to we will help them with your suggestion. Okay, then now thank you, Brother Zahid. So just hang around. We'll until the third speaker, where later on we have Q&A. Yeah, please stay with us, Zahid. For now, let me introduce our second speaker. Yeah, our second speaker is Professor Dr. Ahmad Kamil Madimira. Okay, so before I introduce our second speaker, I would like to our viewers, please, if you have any questions, start asking question either in our Facebook page, comment, or even in YouTube. Okay, so later on, after the third speaker, we'll ask the question to all the relevant speakers. Okay, so now our second speaker, Professor Dr. Ahmad Kamil Madimira. He holds a PhD degree in finance from University of North Texas, USA. His undergraduate and master degree were in economics from the International Islamic Institute of Malaysia. His wide areas of interest and expertise include finance, Islamic banking, financial market, investment analysis, macroeconomics, economic of social issue, and quantitative method. He has extensive experience in teaching, training, consulting, and research in above areas. His works have been published in reputed local international journal. He is known for his writing on the concept of money and payment system, particularly the importance of gold backing of currencies, the gold dinar in the case of Islamic economies. He's also a founding chairman of Movement for Monetary Justice Malaysia. Okay, having that be said, so I would like to call Professor Dr. Ahmad Kamil Madimira to give his talk. Yes, please.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Brother Helmi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Assalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadan Nabiyil Ummi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri min uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum to everyone, and very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are, respected attendees of this webinar. So the topic given to me is on debt jubilee. Actually, the three areas we are covering today, public banking, debt jubilee, and sovereign money, these are actually the immediate solutions proposed by MMJ, or the Movement for Monetary Justice, for the current economic crisis we are facing globally, monetary and economic crisis we are facing globally. This is something that can be immediately implemented in order to overcome the crisis, these three. So Brother Zahid has explained to you what is public banking. So let me cover what is debt jubilee, and Dr. Razman will come forth and he will talk about what is the sovereign money solutions, okay? So can I share the slides, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please, Prof.
Okay, thank you. All right, hold on, let me go to the first page, okay. So can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, good, So basically, what is debt jubilee? As I mentioned to you, basically debt jubilee means cancellation of all private and public debt. That sounds very radical, isn't it? But it's nothing new actually. It has been going on for thousands of years in our human history. And also we can hear, IMF, World Bank periodically also cancelling the debts of nations. So that is the meaning of cancellation of debt. And this cancellation of debt is actually very important to solve the present crisis, to get us out of this crisis and to move forward. This is actually very important. This is what I would like to argue with you, and then reason with you why this is necessary in the present crisis. And we know the present crisis is actually triggered by the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that started sometime early of last year, 2020. Yeah. So just to tell you, before the crisis, what economists were expecting? We were actually expecting the short-term economic cycle and a long-term economic contractive cycle to coincide. We were expecting, in other words, we were actually expecting in 2020 a major economic crisis to take place that will start from the collapse of a burst of some kind of a debt bubble. So if you remember the 2008 housing bubble that burst in the US, it has repercussions throughout the world. Yeah. So we were expecting something like that, a bigger one to take place in 2020. But what happened was not triggered by a financial crisis, but something that happened from the real crisis, which is from the real economy caused by a pandemic. Okay. Whether the pandemic was created on deliberately or not is not what we are going to discuss here. Okay. That's other people's scientists' topic. Yeah. So if you notice, this is like the contractive long-term curve that takes place about 50 to 60 years, you see. Every 60 to 50 to 60 years, that takes place. So you can see that from year 2000, we have been expecting a winter, contractive winter, which means it's about until 2030 or 2025, we'll be going down. That's what is happening now, yeah? Before it starts to rise again with some kind of new technological advancement. Could be the use of quantum physics, something that can take us to another summer, spring and summer again. So we are still on a downward trend, okay? Now what happened from the crisis of pandemic is that it actually affected both the aggregate supply and the aggregate demand. When we started to lock down, when economies were locked down, then we were not able to produce goods and services as we used to produce before. And at the same time, we were not employing people also when factories shut down and so forth. So therefore, there was also a fall in aggregate demand. Yeah. So both aggregate demand and aggregate supply shrunk, and that caused liquidity shrink in economies. Liquidity means how easily we can transact. Yeah, the amount of money in circulation all will start to shrink when the aggregate demand and aggregate supply shrinks in the present monetary setup. So the major issue is actually liquidity shrinks. Yeah. But what after that is there will be, of course, investment will fall, exports will fall, unemployment will rise. These are all natural consequences of this. But to jumpstart the economy again, it is necessary for governments to come in because both the supply side and the demand side are stuck. So the governments must come in and pump in money. That's why the stimulus packages are important. Yeah. So this is how the economy is jump-started. So basically, you can think of like this: an economy is a circular flow. It moves in a circular flow. So when you put a lockdown, the circular flow of like a liquid, like you are, moving, making a whirl of water, So when you put something to stop it, then the swelling of the water stops. Yeah. So you need to start back. That's where the pumping in of the packages, the stimulus packages are necessary to start back the water to move again. So the moment we put another lockdown, all your past stimulus packages, the effects will go down again or become ineffective. You need to redo the whole thing again. Yeah. So now, with that in mind, so let me show you how the banking system works and why the debt jubilee is important. Now imagine you have a developer who wants to develop some apartments. Each apartment costs about 500,000 ringgit in Malaysia, okay? Doesn't matter in any currency. I'm using ringgit as an example. 500,000 ringgit for each apartment. So he goes to the bank and borrows money to develop the apartments. So the bank gives the developer a credit for each apartment, a credit of 500,000 because he needs the 500,000. That is the cost for developing the apartment. So just like Brother Zahid was explaining to you, the bank will actually create the 500,000 through just accounting process. It's not from the deposits of other people. Yeah, it's actually through accounting process. Is a new money creation. It's created out of nothing, and that money will be given to the developer, and the developer will use the money, the credit given to him or her, and buy the resources necessary to construct the apartments. Yeah. So here it is very clear the banking sector has so much of power to allocate resources in the economy. You notice not that? Because to whomever the bank gives the loan, that person will have the purchasing power to actually allocate the resources. So that's one thing you have to remember. The banking sector has a very important role to play. To whomever it gives the loan, that person has the responsibility or to allocate the resources of the nation. Yeah. Now let's say the developer has constructed the apartment and he puts the price of 750,000. It's about 50% profit. Yeah. Normally they take about 60 to 100% profit or even more. I'm just assuming it takes 50% profit. He puts the 750,000 is the market price. Okay. But buyers, they will still go to the bank and borrow money in order to buy the condominium or apartment. Yeah. So the buyer, when he goes to the bank, and let's say he takes a 30-year loan. So the total payment is 1.5 million, for example. So which is 100% more. Why? Because you are taking 30 years to pay back. That's fine. Yeah. So the total amount the buyer got to pay is 1.5 million ringgit. All right. So this is so when many people take loans like this, then the loan in the economy will rise like this. So if you plot the graphs for any country, the total loans, the household loans, the business loans, the government loans, all will be rising exponentially like this. Yeah, you can check for any country. At some point in time, the loans will become not repayable. So that's when the bubbles will burst and the economy will start to go down again. Okay, that's another story. Yeah. But what I'm trying to show you here is that now let's say something like this happens, like a bubble burst or like the pandemic, when the liquidity shrinks, then NPLs and non-performing loans will start to rise. People will start to default on their loans. Yeah. So now when that happens, you see what happens to the income to the bank and what happens to the buyers. Yeah. Watch carefully. Yeah. Now let's say the person who took the loans, the 750,000 loan, a buyer, he has to pay back 1.5 million. And so far he has paid 300,000 when the default takes place. All right. The default is taking place, but he has already paid 300,000. But the market value of the house has risen to 1 million. Original was 750,000, but now the market price has gone up to 1 million. All right. But when he defaults, then the bank will take possession of the house and auction the house in the market. When it is auctioned off, then the bank will get 1 million because that is the new market price of the house. So the bank gets 1 million, right? So this is the calculation here. Notice here, the original cost is 750. All right. So the 750 was the cost, but then it was sold. The person must sell. Total payment is 1.5 million. The customer has paid 300,000, but the market price is 1 million. So the bank will get, the customer still owes the bank the total 1.5 million minus how much has been paid, 300,000. So the difference is 1.2 million, right? Now the 1.2 million, but the market price is only 1 million. So the customer still owes 200,000. Now this is something like Islamic financing I'm taking, example where the total amount is the selling price of the house and so forth. Yeah. So this is the customer still owes the bank 200,000. In conventional financing is the present value of all the remaining installments. Yeah. That will be the total amount repayable and the market value, the difference. So the total loss to customer is always what is the total P value minus the market value of the asset. That will be the total loss for any customer. And for the bank, it is actually the balance, the one in red color here, the balance, the P minus the L. For every loan, the bank will get what the customer needs to pay and what is the market value of the asset. The difference will be an income to the cash inflow to the bank. So if there are 100 loans like that, then 100 Bs will be added up. So when an economy goes into a recession, like a pandemic, or in like the crisis that took place in 2008, so the banking sector will be able to rake in a lot of cash inflow. So they will be making a lot of money. Yeah. So therefore, don't make a mistake. Yeah? Bankers actually, they love recessions. So what happens is that during recessions, money created out of thin air becomes real. That means the money, the banking system cannot create money for its own self. Yeah, it cannot create money for its own self. It can only lend it, can create and lend it. But when someone defaults, it is also as though it is creating the money for its own self. Yeah. So that's why they love when people default. So all efforts of the home buyer, all the previous payments, quote unquote, gets confiscated. Yeah. So it's, as I mentioned to you, it's like the bank creating the money for itself. Huh? So it makes a large profit during recession times. So this is the basic the structure. Let me skip these things and then show you what happened in, like, for example, in 2008 housing market crash. So in the housing market crash, if you remember, in the American US housing market crash, Henry Paulson, in the tragedy at that time, he requested 700 billion bailout in order to bail out the financial system. Notice that they were not only able to get all these houses, because when you cancel the debt of the borrowers, the money shrinks, the amount of money shrinks in the banking books when you cancel, when you take possession and then you resell and so forth. So the banking sector also would not have, they will not have enough money or to lend out anymore after that. So they need to be recapitalized, and that's when the 700 billion, almost $1 trillion, yeah, were actually created out of nothing in order to refinance the banking sector. So that was a huge profit for the banking sector actually. Yeah. So those people who purchase, they will become homeless. So when a person defaults, not only all your past payments just disappear, right? In so to speak, you'll be homeless. You'll be left in the streets like this, as you see in the picture. So if you notice, in what happens after the crisis, if you do not cancel the debt, so the household debt, the business debt, even the government debt, all will increase. Because to do the stimulus packages, many governments, they borrow money from IMF, World Bank, and so on. Even Malaysia borrowed a lot of money from these international lenders in order to finance our stimulus packages, billions of dollars. So the households, you see, the household debt came to a new peak in Malaysia, 93.3%. Then the government also borrowed. Businesses also got to borrow. So all will become highly indebted. So, and as I mentioned to you, many will start to default on their loans. So bankruptcies will rise. So these are the number of bankruptcies that have been rising in Malaysian data, yeah, on a monthly basis. So rising, falling, and rising, and so forth, yeah. So and this is the is in Malay. What it tells is the age group. The age group, you can see most of the borrowers, 36.35% are the age group of 35 and to 44. So if I add the 25 to 34 group, it is 23.23. So it's almost 70%, almost 70% of borrowers, those who are defaulting, are the younger generation. They're only from 25 to 44. They are just new in life, they're just starting life, 25 to 44. They declared bankrupt, you see. So these are the things that you see in this kind of economic situations. And if you notice, for what reason all these loans were taken, sorry, again, it's all in Malay, but the first one is personal loans are 37.7%, and then vehicle loans are 17.79%. This is housing loans 11.32%, business loans are 11%, and credit card loans are 9%, 9.05. So you notice most of the loans are for consumption purposes. Only about 11.5% of for business loans. Yeah, only 11.5% are business loans, because we take business loans as productive loans. That means it's going to create more goods and services. The rest are mostly, you notice, all consumption purposes. So you see, so the economy is growing with debt with basically for consumption purposes. Yeah, like Brother Zahid was explaining to you, we should give financing to productive sectors, isn't it? But on the other hand, as I was mentioning to you, you notice this is to look at the 2020 banking profits. In 2020, most of the economies were in lockdown in Malaysia. Almost the entire year we were in lockdown. Businesses were entirely devastated. But then if you notice, the bankers were making like 30 billion in profit. This year, I can guarantee they'll be making more than 30 billion in profit. And our central bank was telling they were making also, super profits of 10.2 billion. They don't make profits like this in normal times. During crisis time, they are making 10.2 billion profit. You see? So just as I mentioned to you, the banking sectors will be having a gala time during crisis times. Yeah. And during these times, pandemics also, the rich, the elites will become, the billionaires will also increase, because all this, the number of billionaires will increase. This is an old data. 8 billionaires own the same wealth as the poorest 3.6 billion people. 3.6 that time is the half of the population of the world. The entire population of the world, half the wealth is owned by just 8 people in the billionaires of the world. You see? So now maybe it's 5 or 4 only. So Michael Hudson is a well-known economist from the US. He wrote this book, The Lost Tradition of Biblical Debt Cancellations. Now he was telling historically in the Jewish tradition, and I mean that periodically that the kingdoms, the kings, and rulers will give cancel all debt. Public and private debts will be cancelled, and slaves will be free. We think it is a generous action on their part, but compassion action. But in reality, actually, it is necessary for the kingdom. If they don't give this kind of debt cancellation, the kingdom can fall. In those days, if your people become indebted like this, economy can collapse, and outsiders can come and invade your nation. So to avoid that, they had to do this periodical debt cancellation. So this periodic debt cancellation is actually necessary even now, in order to avoid this kind of total destruction of economies. And I see, and we at MMJ, we see, and this is necessary because we have done uh, economic lockdowns, and these economic lockdowns were done globally. Almost all nations were affected. So we have not seen the real effects of the lockdown yet, more to come. There are going to be, we are predicting food shortages and, hyperinflation and so forth. So if you really want to solve this problem, debt cancellation is actually necessary and urgent, yeah? So this is what Michael Hudson was saying. The core body of law within the Judeo-Christian Bible has become all but ignored nowadays. Indeed, rejected this law by the colder temper of our times. The core provided for periodic restoration of economic order. Notice, periodic restoration of economic order by rituals of social renewal based on freedom from debt servitude, from the debt a slave, slavery of debt. So you need to, from the loss of one's access to self-support on the land. So radical as the idea of cancelling debt and restoring the population's mean of subsistence seems to modern eyes, it had been a conservative tradition in Bronze Age Mesopotamia for some 2 millennia, you see. It's something which was normal, even though it sounds a radical idea in today's terms. Okay, so and therefore, debt jubilee is one of the main suggestions that we in Movement for Monetary Justice are making to mitigate the economic recession caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. All right. Now, the thing is this: our government, the SMEs, the real sector has been asking the government, please give us a moratorium on the loans. Moratorium means just 6 months, just freedom from paying back the loan. After 6 months, resume back the payment. That means we want a debt-free period for 6 months without interest. But the banking sector says no, they still want to charge the interest. So if we charge interest, that means there is more income for the bankers. You see? So this is in the last year, the SMEs were given a free, interest-free moratorium. But this year, they are refusing to give. Yeah. So that is not a good. But the debt jubilee will revive the economy, like what happened in Germany after World War II. Remember? So the debt jubilee and also a new currency was created that actually revived back economy from the distractions of World War II. And debt jubilee can also elevate spirits, the labor force and everyone, and it can avoid bankruptcies of businesses, individuals, and avoid starvation, and also suicides from mental and psychological pressures, right? So that's the reason the debt jubilee is very, very crucial. Even in Malaysia, a lot of households are going through very difficult times now. Unfortunately, I'm not sure, if these are properly being remedied. I think it is not actually, yeah? All right. Unfortunately, even just the last 31st August, yeah, our finance ministry was saying Malaysian government looking at ways to increase tax collection, including voluntary disclosure of unpaid indirect taxes, you see. So what we are saying is that when debt jubilee means including all the tax areas, we need to write off tax areas. But here the government wants to increase tax collection. Imagine businesses and households are already cash strapped, Cash flow is really affected. At this moment, how to increase tax, isn't it? We are talking about tax write-offs. So if we impose this, it will further devastate businesses. Of course, the question will come, if you write off tax areas and so on, then where would the government would get revenue from? And this is the solution which Brother Zahid and Dr. Razman will be giving in the later in it. The public banking solution and the sovereign money is the solution to this. Where the government is going to get revenue, you see. So you need to go to a new paradigm in order to solve. After an economic lockdown like this, you cannot try to remain in the status quo or previous paradigm. You need to come up with a new paradigm. Yeah. So what we need to do to jumpstart the economy is that we need to first help the households to access the economic networks. What we mean by economic networks is that you must make sure they have the food, their home, if they are paying rentals for homes, they must be able to pay the rentals, and access to education, health, and so on is necessary, because many households are really affected with no jobs and so on. Yeah. And also to businesses, they are cash strapped, their cash flows are affected, particularly the working capital financing. So the government must come forth and provide the working capital. This is where you need the public banking. The public banking can create the money. So all governments must realize that you have the right to create the currency of the nation. Why borrow? Why do you have to go and borrow money from outsiders? They will give you an electronic record as money, not anything real. They're not going to give you gold or anything, right? Money is just fiat. It is just abstract. We can create our own self, right? So this is why the public banking and sovereign money are important concepts for today in order to solve the present economic problem. Yeah, create the money out of nothing and give to all these ailing businesses and jumpstart them. This is what we need to do, and give debt relief, moratorium, debt cancellation, write off. And tax reliefs and tax breaks. This is what we are talking about, not increasing tax, and also contractual obligations like rentals, utilities, salaries, all this needs to be assisted so that the economy can be jump-started again. Malaysia came out with a new act, the temporary measures to reduce the impact of coronavirus 2019. So I was actually expecting the government to do these things, give a rental, breaks, and salaries and so forth for businesses that are affected. But it looks like it didn't happen that way. Yeah. So, and this is one of our friends from Movement for Monetary Justice. He wrote an interesting article in The Age on 24th of November on debt jubilee. So I'd like to just highlight a few points from his for example, when debt grows too large to be repaid without reducing debtors to poverty, the way to hold society together, and restore balance is simply to cancel the bad debts. You see? So this is the way to hold a society together. If you don't do this, the society is going to crumble. It's going to fall. Yeah. And in history, without debt jubilee, there was a danger of kingdoms falling. And the same thing applies now. So look at German debt jubilee in 1948. Yeah. So created German economic miracle. You see? And time to recognize that many debts now cannot be repaid. Many countries, the debt cannot be repaid. Even just look at the US debt levels. Trillions of dollars, more than $70 trillion, I believe, cannot be repaid. How we want to repay? Because numbers are just created abstract. Then compounded interest, we impose compounded interest on an abstract number. It just goes off tangent, So you can't repay that. So you need to cancel all that and we need to restart back. Okay. So in talking about the debt cancellation, there are 4 levels. In Malaysia, we're only asking for a moratorium. Or simply a moratorium is just deferring the repayment of debt. Just like 6 months or 1 year of deferment. Interest-free. Let the businesses, recover, give them some time to breathe, and start back. But even then, even this is being rejected, in Malaysia. Number 2 is cancellation, only the interest portions. you just cancel the interest portion of the loans, require only the repayment of principal portion. This is actually the Islamic concept. When any loan, if it is interest based, the interest needs to be cancelled. You only repay the principal portion. The third form, if you are not even giving that, if the economy goes to even into a worse position, you may have to give a total debt jubilee. This is the Judeo-Christian type, which Michael Hudson was talking about, or the historical biblical type. So the historical biblical type of debt cancellation is all the total cancellation of private and public debt. Yeah. Now the last one is a complete economic reset. If the economy is completely devastated, you may have to restart the entire economy reset. So one is you need to give a total cancellation of the debt, and you may have to do reallocation of a real wealth in the economy. That means you confiscate all the assets from the economy, reallocate to everyone, and then restart with a new currency. That means it is like a completely a new reset of the economy. This is something like what Germany did after World War II. And I think many countries after this pandemic, I think we may have to do an economic reset. Many nations will see an economic reset is necessary. I see the fourth as the way that many nations will be going towards to. Okay, but for Malaysia, it is only economically, socially, and morally right that loan moratorium, which is number one, this is the first level, be immediately given to automatically to the bottom 40 and the medium 40 of the economy. We were asking for a loan moratorium, but unfortunately, the Malaysian finance minister, he said just because we can, that is, we can give moratorium, does not mean we should. So we think that is a bit not a good statement, because the banking sector actually creates loan out of nothing. They create money out of nothing. And during recessions, they make billions of dollars of profit. Why can't they share by just giving a little bit of breathing space for the real economy? It is because of the real economy that produces goods and services we enjoy good economic well-being, not the financial sector. The financial sector creates actually nothing, accounting, this thing, they just create abstract thing. It is the real economy that creates goods and services through which the economy, everyone in the economy, we enjoy a good living standard. Yeah. So I hope that a loan moratorium is the minimum thing that we can give to the real economy. But as I was telling, soon we will realize we may have to give at least a Judeo-Christian type of debt jubilee, or we may have to even give a complete economic reset. Get ready for that. So I think, thank you very much, because we need to give time to Dr. Razman to speak. So I will just stop here. Thank you very much. Wallahu alam. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ahmad Kamil Manimbira. A very interesting topic about debt jubilee. And one point, very interesting point that I would like to pick up is that debt cancellation being done during the past century to save the country from collapse, and being invaded, which is, I think, leaders in the countries around the world, especially I think in a less developed country, should take note of that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Prof. I think we will have more question later on. We will ask at the end of the after Dr. Ahmad Razman talk. Okay. So for now, our third speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Ahmad Razman Abdul Latif. Okay, so let me give him some his introduction, his background. Dr. Ahmad Razman is currently teaching MBA courses in Putra Business School. He holds a postgraduate degree from Nanyang Technical University, Lancaster University, and Liverpool John Moores University. He's an associate member of Malaysian Institute of Accountant, MIA, and he also the Vice President Finance of Case Writers Association of Malaysia and Executive Committee member of Movement for Monetary Justice. So today, tonight, or morning, wherever you are, like Prof. Kamil said earlier, Dr. Ahmad Razman will talk about sovereign money. So having that we said, please welcome Dr. Ahmad Razman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Brother Hilmi. And looking at the Malaysian time now, it's 10:56 p.m. So I promise I will not go on until 5th September. So I hope I will just able to finish it before then. I would like to share my screen now. Okay. Right. So the topic that's given to me is actually on sovereign money, and perhaps many people is asking what exactly is sovereign money. Well, nowadays the term has become even more confusing for what we call money or currency or credit, and the one report that I think very useful for anybody to get to know what kind of money we are talking about nowadays is by referring to this annual report by the Central Bank of Malaysia or Bank Negara, and you can simply type Bank Negara Malaysia or Central Bank of Malaysia on the Google annual report 2020. And the report can be downloaded for free. And there are many reports, there are many articles written in this annual report, but the one that I would like you to focus is on the page 55. Okay, so if you happen to download the annual report, please go to the page 55. So when you go to page 55, this is what you will see. It is it is report on the different type of fiat currency, e-money, and digital assets. So nowadays we know we have paper money and coins, and we have for the past few years have been introduced to something we call cryptocurrency. The most popular one probably Bitcoin, and actually whether we realize or not, we have been using another form of money. It's called electronic money or e-money. In Malaysia, we probably have around 40 platform provider for e-money, whereas in China they only have two, WeChat and Alipay. But in Malaysia we have like Boost, Grab, Touch and Go, so many form of e-money. And e-money is actually just a representative of a fiat currency, but issued by the private sector, but it is backed by the currency of the country. So in Malaysia, it's backed actually by ringgit, but it's actually used for means of payment, meaning that instead of carrying physical cash in your pocket, then you can simply transfer or have the exchange of product services using electronic representation of such fiat currency. And we have now the cryptocurrency, which is not backed by anything and issued privately, but there's also emerging form of currency called stable coin, which can be backed by fiat currency and can be backed by commodity. So it's all these privately issued asset, whether they are being backed by anything or not, are trying to gain a foothold in the in the center of the monetary transaction of any particular country. This is where they want to make sure that the usage of this asset created or issued by a private sector will still gain foothold in day-to-day transaction of the people. But when we look into a traditional currency issued by the government, we see we have the physical printed paper money and coin. Many government around the world, I think about 60 to 80% of the central bank of a country all around the world have started to look into another form of currency called central bank digital currency, or commonly known as CBDC. And CBDC is really just like the physical money. It's backed by the government, but it is created under the cryptocurrency technology or blockchain technology. So it has a form like a cryptocurrency, but it's not decentralized, but it's controlled by the government. So now you're probably asking, okay, I cannot find where is this sovereign money in this table, in this diagram. Okay, you can only see the fiat currency issued by the government, electronic money issued by the private, digital asset issued by the private. So where exactly the sovereign money? That is the title of my presentation. Where, well, this sovereign money is something that is not there yet, but it's a combination of the best features of both type of currency or money, whether it's issued by the government, by the sovereign body, or by the private. So later, hopefully towards the end of the presentation, I will be able to show you why sovereign money will be the best solution for what we are facing right now, and because it carries the best features of all this type of currency or money. So before that, maybe we have to backtrack a little, need to understand why we cannot remain using the existing form of currency or money. Probably somebody will say, I think everything is okay. The current currency is being accepted by everybody. Why should we change something that is not broken? Well, fiat currency is actually a very broken currency, and there are many evidence to show why fiat currency is broken. Many 100,000 years ago, when civilization use a medium of exchange, they use a currency that's being backed by ilah or ain, or intrinsic value that carries some value. And fiat money, when it first introduced, has actually caused disruption to the community and was widely rejected. Only recently, I think a few less than 100 years, when almost every country has started to adopt the fiat currency, but it's not normal. It's an outlier. Majority throughout the civilization, we have been using money that has been backed by some form of value. So the money that we have now, being the one that we printed by the government, we call it fiat because it has no intrinsic value. It's not being backed by any physical commodity. It is legal because the government says so. It carry the value of 20 ringgit because the government says so. If there's no government, if the government collapse, meaning the nation be taken over by another country, then the money carry no value. Okay, so it started occasionally in certain community but rejected. In Malaysia, the best example before our independence, after the World War II, during the World War II, when the Japanese occupied Malaysia, they tried to introduce their own version of national money currency, but since it's also a fiat currency, it was widely rejected by the public and it's worth nothing. And US dollar used to be backed by gold, and after the World War II, under the Bretton Woods agreements, they fixed US dollar to gold. But in 1971, during the event called Nixon shock, it was no longer tied to gold until now. So the whole world currency is no longer tied to any commodity. So all world currency is now actually a fiat currency. And when it's become fiat currency, we can see how it rapidly loses its value against gold, for example, as one of the commodity. So that's why we have started. It's not that we see the gold price going up. It's actually the currency has depreciated heavily against the gold. And when it's a fiat money, the government can do anything. For example, in India, they decided to pull the 500 and 1,000 rupee notes out of circulation, and people who are unable to convert their rupee become trapped, not being able to use their money for business transaction anymore. And another interesting fact, when you keep printing the physical cash and coins, it's very difficult to track them. In fact, Bank of England at the moment unable to trace their bank notes that were 50 billion pounds. So probably there are lots of pillows where the people put underneath this money, but the bank simply cannot trace all this money. And Brother Zahid did mention that all this fiat currency printed by the central bank only constitute less than 5% in any particular country. Similarly, in Malaysia, it's around that also, it's about 6%. And when we look into the movement, the trend, when we look into M1 and M2, because M1 and M2 is actually the credit created when the commercial bank lending money, the increase is actually far greater than M0. And especially during the 2020, if you look here at the money supply M1 at the year 2020 during the pandemic, it's a huge drastic increase of M1. So that's actually very interesting because the one that we supposed to see is actually the M0, the currency government want to pump. But then the lending here actually also cost by when the government had to borrow lots of money to provide the funding. Okay, and when there are so much credit being circulated due to the unrestricted lending by the commercial bank, what we can see is that the house pricing keep going up and up and up. There's one good short video that you can watch the YouTube. Just type house prices. Why are they so high? This is under the Positive Money subscribe YouTube channel. Then you will understand. It's only 2 minutes long, but you will understand why the house prices will be keep increasing and increasing. And in fact, during this pandemic, it is not really going down. It's just plateauing, but not really going down. And also, like what Brother Zahid mentioned, why this credit creation by commercial bank will increase the poverty gap. So again, you can just type this video, the inequality, why are the rich getting richer? So then you will understand why the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, even during this pandemic. And it's demonstrated in Malaysia. The Gini coefficient has increased, especially when compared between urban area and rural area. So everywhere, the gap is increasing higher and higher. And in Malaysia also, it's shown that the demand by the rich still there even during the pandemic. They keep buying luxury cars like Mercedes, like BMW. In fact, BMW reported 9 consecutive record year. So meaning even during the pandemic, they are still making a very good sales. And it's proven, if you look into the latest Forbes World's Billionaire 2021, like what Prof. Kamil mentioned, the 8 billionaires have a wealth of more than 3 billion people. In Malaysia, the top 50 richest person in Malaysia seen their wealth increased by 14%. And Singapore, 50 richest, see their wealth rise by 25%. So they are getting richer and richer. And if you look into the global setting, the world's wealthiest experienced 5 trillion surge in wealth. So meaning that they have more billionaires, 2,755, 660 more than a year ago. So altogether, they are worth 13.1 trillion. So something is wrong. Something is wrong when the whole world is struggling, but we can see this top 1% is actually not really affected, but truly benefiting. So in fact, in Malaysia, when we the red line here indicate the time when we impose the lockdown. So when people stuck in their house, the rich started playing. They are not playing computer games. They are playing in the stock exchange. So when I plot the volume of trading, you can see the before the lockdown and after the lockdown, the volume of transaction in the stock exchange gone up. So meaning that this is not contributing to the real economy. So meaning that the rich, they just simply dump their money into the stock exchange, buying and selling. So the money just transfer between them. It doesn't really go into the real economy. So the increase of volume of transaction can be clearly seen here. And like what Brother Zahid mentioned, during this pandemic, even though the wealthy people getting wealthier, the common people actually getting deeper and deeper in debt. We have the #1 record in ASEAN country as the highest household debt to GDP and the second highest in Asia after South Korea. And during this pandemic, it kept increasing and increasing and increasing. Now nearing about 93.3% of GDP. So there are many videos that can be accessed in YouTube to explain how the creation of credit by bank cause all this debt to accumulate higher and higher. My favorite video is Hidden Secrets of Money, episode 4. If you are too lazy to watch the whole 30 minutes of the video, just remember Hidden Secret of Money, episode 4, minutes 444. So just remember 4 minutes 44 seconds. You will see how money is actually being created and enriched the bankers rather than the people. And so that's actually to highlight that something is wrong with the current usage of the fiat money and credit, meaning that all this money being printed by the government is only from 5%, okay? And the 95% is actually beyond the control of government through the credit, through the lending of commercial bank. When commercial bank lend do the lending, credit being created, and too much credit cause all this problem: the inflation, the rising of housing prices, and also the income equality and the poverty gap. So so during this pandemic also, when this happened, rather than controlling the creation of credit by this commercial bank, so what majority of the government, when they want to solve the liquidity issue, because during this pandemic, during this crisis, there's not much liquidity in the market, they thought people do not have the money, but actually it's not. It's just the rich actually holding most of the money. The poor just simply didn't have the money. So the government thought, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pump in money into the market. And how we're going to do that? We're going to do something called quantitative easing. And the QE, or sometimes they call it helicopter money. We are going to keep borrowing, normally in form of government bond, long-term government bond, and then we're going to use the money to kickstart the economy by granting loan or awards of project. But when they do this, it's not really goes to the real economy. Most of the money created by the bank essentially goes into the housing price bubbles, and only 40% actually only 30%, sorry, only 30% ends up in the real economy. The rest goes to the 37% to the financial market, 40% to the housing price bubbles. So the act of pumping more money through borrowing is not actually really helping, it's actually making it even worse. And in Malaysia, when we facing this, we had this one deputy minister who suggested that the central bank should print money, but his comment was taken out of context because somehow when the word print money was mentioned, it means that we are simply keep increasing the circulation of fiat money. But then, like what Brother Zahid and myself have been saying, this money being printed is only constituted 5%, less than that maybe. So if we keep printing, it's not going to give effect to tackle the crisis, because the majority, 95%, actually is not being controlled by the government. So what exactly is printing money? It doesn't mean we print the paper money. It means something else. And this has been discussed by Brother Zahid also in one of the online webinar, and we're talking about the helicopter money or quantitative easing. We are not advocating this, but we are actually suggesting another type of money. And this money is called sovereign money. And when the Central Bank of Malaysia in their 2020 report started to look into the benefit and risks of CBDC, so then this is open opportunity to started to introduce sovereign money via the CBDC CBDC issuance. In this 2020 report, the Central Bank of Malaysia are not really sure yet on whether to proceed with this CBDC or not. So basically, when you talk about CBDC, it's just paper money, but in electronic form, in digital form. So they are, at the time, they are not so sure. But the rest of the world has started to do serious works on this. Bahamas already launched their CBDC. People Republic China already tested this in several provinces. So many government as for central bank has started to look into this. And in fact, even the Israel also has tested their Ethereum based digital shekel. And like I said, China, they tested it using this CBDC in several provinces, and they are now thinking of how they can use this even for international trading. And the latest one, this is just yes, I think 2 days ago or 1 day ago, when there is news that several countries have started to work together. Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, they have this one project called Project Dunbar, and trying to look into whether they can come up with a shared platform to use a cross-border transaction using multiple CBDCs. So they have seen the benefit of electronic transaction because it can save costs, ease of transaction, and also probably better security because it is under blockchain technology. So this is probably going to be a way forward where everything will be digitalized, and the paper money that we always carry inside our wallet might be thing of the past. So it's still fiat money. So now, what exactly sovereign money mean? So there is one document that you can also download from the website for free, and I really strongly recommend all of you to go to the Positive Money website and just type sovereign money, paving the way for a sustainable recovery, and you will find this white paper report on how to actually implement this sovereign money in your country. So this suggestion, sovereign money, is not meant for a private corporation. It's meant for a government on how to come up with sovereign money. So sovereign money carries this three characteristics. Okay, it is where the issuing body, the sovereign body, can decide the currency unit, meaning decide whether it's going to be a dollar, a ringgit, okay, and then a dinar, whatever, and then the sovereign body issue it, okay, issue the money, and then create the money, and then the third is by creating this money, they take the benefit of creating it by seigniorage. When we look into the current situation now, the central bank only issue the currency unit, decide, okay, it's going to be the ringgit or it's going to be a dollar. When we're talking about creating it, 95% is actually being created by credit by the commercial bank. So the government or the central bank didn't have the control, is no longer the main producer or main creator of the money. And then because of that, they couldn't take the benefit, the seigniorage benefit of creating this additional money. So when we're talking about sovereign money, so meaning that it must be a situation where the power of creating the credit now must go back to the government or to the central bank. Okay, so when this goes back 100% to the central bank, then the money that being created will fulfill the characteristic of sovereign money. And when this happen, there are many benefit coming from that. So when you return the power of credit creation from commercial bank to a sovereign body, you can call it sovereign bank, you can call it public bank, like Brother Zahid, I think he mentioned public banking. I just prefer call it a sovereign bank because it sounds sovereign. And so when transfer the power of credit creation to sovereign bank, then it will make the power to control the credit creation belongs solely to one particular body, one bank, a sovereign bank, and we put it under the parliament, like what Brother Said mentioned. So then the commercial banks, the existing one, they can still exist. They can perform the role of transaction bank and investment bank. Okay, so where they can handle any services needed by their depositors for the purpose of doing a certain transaction, buying or selling, but they cannot give out loan. Okay, and for the investment bank, they will invest in businesses under the equity profit and loss sharing concept, and they also cannot give out loan. The loan now handled by this sovereign bank, and so the sovereign bank will perform the function of credit lending, so they can now control the credit circulated in the market, and if the central bank now started to issue this CBDC, so this credit can also be in form of CBDC, and they can create money in form of CBDC, which actually can be a more efficient way of being in charge of the money. Like I said, Bank of England cannot trace their 50 billion. In this case, is if now we transition into the CBDC, it is traceable, and we can see which sector that's currently flush with the money and which sector lacking it. So when we want to do fiscal injection or fiscal stimulus, then we can easily target a particular sector because we know that is where they are lacking in terms of liquidity. And since the credit now being created by central bank, then there's no need to differentiate M0 and M1, because before this M1 is credit created by commercial bank. So now when commercial bank is no longer out of equation, so we can combine both M0 and M1, and it just become M. And so when sovereign bank able to control this amount of credit, then it can avoid all this problem, high inflation, liquidity problem, and is free from interference by any politician. And now they have the power to provide credit to the individual and businesses, and they can focus on the real economy, meaning the loan given is not meant to just simply pay off another debt. It's not simply for the business to just simply buy equity of another company, but the loan that they took must be must go to the community, maybe through the capital expansion, through launching new product that require them to hire more workers. So now the sovereign bank has more say on how the money should be sent, and the commercial bank can help the sovereign bank in handling this loan transaction, so they don't have to lay off their workers. They will be able to keep their workers to handle the loan transaction, and the sovereign bank can invest in investment bank to fund also the real economy. And like I think Brother Zahid and Prof Kamil has mentioned, the commercial bank have been making billions of money, and this money now will be generated by the sovereign bank, and this can be used to reduce tax, to help cover the government annual expenditures, to give out people dividend, and also to do the investment. So when we look into this sovereign money, it will be a money that is being created that is more efficient. Now we have the technology to do so, and it's people friendly because the people benefited from this, and of course it's country friendly. It's avoid the inflation, the bank run situation will not happen. There will be no bank bailout during the financial crisis, and it's not going to be affected by the volatile base lending rate. And the price of consumer product also will be more stable, improve on the salary, low inflation, minimal unemployment, free education, and house for all. And and then that's certainly not just the end objective. For us, movement of monetary justice, we also hope once this sovereign money has been created using blockchain technology in the form of CBDC, we hope eventually that this it is still fiat. It is fiat, even though it is CBDC, but we hope eventually that will be backed by the commodity. Okay, and like Brother Zahid also mentioned, the common commodity can be gold and silver, but we can also use other form of commodity that is accepted by the community. In Malaysia, it probably can be palm oil, it can be rubber or salt or sugar. And the reason why we need to do the transition to a commodity-backed sovereign money is that when we're talking about fiat, eventually it will return to its intrinsic value. And we have seen the effect of fiat, it rapidly depreciating against the real commodity, and the inflation is actually diminish the value. So we do not want keep having this currency that keep diminishing the value of the things, because this is not what in line with what Islam has wanted for us when we do the muamalat, the trading, the transaction with people. So that's all. The most of the things that I highlighted here actually can be easily obtained from the internet. You can refer to my slide, just use the title of the article, title of the video, title of the document. You can easily find it on the internet. And I wish you all the best to anybody, to any country, to any official in any country, to start exploring all this solution by movement for monetary justice. We have nothing to lose, because Albert Einstein used to say, to keep doing the same thing again and again, hoping to get a different result, is insanity. So I'm sure all of us are not crazy people. So let not become a crazy people by trying different thing. And this is what the different thing that we offer. Actually, it's not different, it's the original thing. We just making it, trying to make it common, normal again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Azman. Very interesting presentation. Well, one thing that I can, what we call the major point is that with the sovereign money, the benefit of fiat money creation will be given back to the people, I think. Yeah. So now we have all speakers with us now. We'll go through the question and answer session. We have gathered a few questions from the YouTube and Facebook. So I will read to our speakers. Yeah. The first question is, this is from Sam. What are the chances monetary reform can be successfully implemented in the new government of Afghanistan? I think this maybe I can address to Brother Zahid.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Sam, and also Ilmi. Yes, actually, Afghanistan have got the chance to implement what is really required by the Quran and the Sunnah. So we are very excited. We are looking to assist Afghanistan in any way at all. And we need to remind them to be careful, like I said, of people coming with international debt. And when you deal with China, do not necessarily accept debt. You can always argue for equity relationship with them. I think they will listen to you, because you are a very strategic country. So Afghanistan, as I said in another webinar, is like a piece of white cloth that we can rewrite in terms of a system that really upholds the Quran and the Sunnah, inshallah.
Okay. So our next question is, this is from Shazril Azwin. from our Facebook. Yeah, good forum, which has strengthened my belief that the current monetary system is broken. Yeah, thank you. And my question is, based on what we know so far on how banks are performing versus the numbers of loan currently existing in funding consumption in Malaysia, how feasible is debt jubilee? And if it's feasible, why are we not suggesting that instead of interest-free moratorium? I think this maybe can address to Professor Ahmad Kamil.
Yeah. Well, thank you, brother. Thank you for the question. Well, debt moratorium and even debt jubilee, it needs political will. It needs political will. So, if you ask me, looking at what is happening in Malaysia, we need to give the economy a debt jubilee, means a public and private debt cancellation. I would even go to that level, public and private debt cancellation. But of course, you need a political will to do that, you know. So the minimum our real sector is asking is just for moratorium, just to defer the payment of loans for about 6 months. When that also so difficult to get, you know. So debt jubilee may be even more, you know, politically difficult to But what we are saying is that if you don't give a debt jubilee, then in the economy might be worsening lah. The situation in the economy might worsen. So that is the a problem we are facing now. So then later, when you want to correct the situation, it may be even more difficult at that time. You want to correct the situation at the later period. So that is the situation. Basically, this all boils down to political will. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prof. The next question is, how sovereign money can provide better quality gap between people? I think I will address to Professor Ahmad Razban.
Thank you for the question. Basically, when the control of credit creation falls under one body, then this is how it can improve the quality of people. Because when 95% credit currently being created by the commercial banks, all they are thinking is actually to maximize the wealth of their shareholders. So meaning that it's just a greed. You just need to keep lending all kind of products. I've been to this one bank where they have all kind of product to the young people for their education, to the housing, and also to personal loan. And then when they have started to become more generous, they even giving out them loan to give sadaqah, to give wakaf. Imagine you're taking loan so that you can give sadaqah. And then when they started to go for retirement, you take the loan so that you can enjoy your retirement days, but you use your pension to pay us on monthly. So you know, meaning that we cannot escape. The bank become very creative to make sure you are depending on their this called sustenance from this bank. But when a sovereign body control everything, then they know what is actually needed for the community, what is needed for the people, what is needed for the businesses, and this essentially will greatly improve the quality of life of the people, because it's no longer motivated by the greed to maximize the wealth. Even if it's supposed to maximize the wealth, but it's actually the wealth will go back to the people. So it's not going to go to the top 1%.
Yeah. Very good. Yes, thank you, Dr. Ahmad Razban. We have question from the YouTube, from Kiruban. It seems China understand the manipulation of Basel control banking system. Does China Central Bank reports and takes order from BIS? I think I addressed this to Zahid.
Okay. China is a lot more intelligent than many people are giving them credit for. As I described, they understand money deeply, and that is why they're able to win all the international projects. Yeah. So when it comes to Basel, they are being very diplomatic. All right, they let their central bank, People's Bank of China, be a member. But if you read all the press report, they are very there's a lot of friction between them and BIS. They just pretend to be a member, but I do not think they take any instructions from BIS. Thank you.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Zahid. A question for, I think I address this to Prof. Ahmad Kamil. How can the profit so high in 2020 in Malaysia for the bank when there's a pandemic across the country?
Well, thank you for the question. Actually, that was what I was trying to explain through the diagrams that I was showing. Basically, I was trying to show when a default takes place, during a recession, then the real asset that is finance or anything that is or collaterals that it confiscates, it becomes monetized. You know, so the things monetized and it belongs to the bank. You see, so that is the reason why a lot of cash accumulates. With the bank. So in Malaysia, I know a bank manager who was given 7 months bonus in 2020 when the entire economy was actually under lockdown. You see? There was one chairman who was even given more than 660 million ringgit as a dividend. You know, so it's very strange, isn't it? But it's actually by the structure of the banking system. So in fact, this year, I think the profits are going to be even larger. Because there's no moratorium given, is it? The 6 month moratorium.
Okay. I think that's why hopefully with the proposal for Movement for Monetary Justice, the public banking, the debt jubilee and sovereign money, inshallah, I mean more and more justice in the monetary system will be achieved. I think we reached to our last question now. I will address this to Dr. Ahmad Razman. How to remove the fear of a crisis like Zimbabwe when people talk about money printing? I think because this is what people have been made fear of, crisis like Zimbabwe, for example. How we can remove that fear to make people more understand what does it mean to help the people themselves.
Okay, actually, a misconception when we're talking about the crisis or the hyperinflation happen in Zimbabwe. It's not just simply because printing money. It's just really because of the corruption of the leader, as well as the real economy that being affected through the seizure of the land, the white people land in Zimbabwe by the farmers. So when the real economy affected, and then when you have a corrupt leaders, then this happen. So that's why when we propose a sovereign bank or public banking, it must be free from political interference, meaning that it report directly to the parliament. People might say, well, that's where most of the group are in parliament. but at least they are doing openly. At least it's open to debate in a public record, so the people can see if they trying to do anything to the sovereign bank. Well, the people will punish them in the next election. So we don't want it to be controlled by any politician, whether they're corrupt or not. And then the sovereign money that can start focusing, giving money to pumping money into the real economy. Because if we don't help the real economy, even though we have sovereign money, it will not help. So the real economy is really the main foundation there. So that's how we can avoid from what happened in Zimbabwe not to happen again in our country.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Razman. I think we almost reached 2 hours and 45 minutes now from when we start. and I think it's already long for all the speakers. Okay, I think we will stop for now, and I'm sure we call there's more question to come, but we can call from the YouTube chat and also from the Facebook Live. Later on we will address the question directly from the chat and the comment. Yeah. So reminder, please like and subscribe to our Facebook page and also to YouTube channel to keep joining, keep giving, receiving webinar and so on from us. Yeah, we MMJ would like to thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and hopefully we will do another session and we can share more what we call it solution and suggestion from our team members. Okay, so thank you very much from Malaysia. Good evening, good night. Bye bye.
Assalamualaikum to everybody.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi